The 2015 Polyglot Gathering is brought to you by italki. Become fluent in any language.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Lydia, and I work as a conference interpreter, and I would like to tell you something about it. Besides being a freelance interpreter in Slovakia, I am also a PhD student doing my PhD in translation studies, which basically means that I'm also teaching interpreting at the Comenius University in Bratislava right now. And I would like to tell you something about this nice profession of being an interpreter, about the pleasures and the pains of the job. And just to give you a quick overview, I will start with what actually makes a good interpreter, and I will do two quick demonstrations of that, so we will do it live. And then we'll talk about two basic types of interpreting: consecutive, which is when someone is standing next to me on the stage and I say something and the interpreter says something. And the second type is simultaneous, which is when you go into a booth and you put on headphones and the speaker is speaking all the time and you're also speaking in the other language all the time, which I think many of you know. Then we'll speak about some rules in interpreting, and I will tell you what happens when a crisis situation happens and how interpreters deal with it. And then we will talk about the real pleasures and pains of the job. And finally, if you are interested, maybe how to become an interpreter, I'll give you a few tips how to do it. But first, we'll start with this question: what makes a good interpreter? And we will do it like this. I will show you an interpreting here, but I will not be the interpreter now. I will be the speaker, and I will be speaking in my mother tongue, Slovak. And I would like to call on stage my interpreter, Peter, whom I'm sure many of you, all the Esperanto speakers in the room know, and he will interpret me into English, okay? Priatelia, chcela by som sa s vami podeliť o jednu úžasnú skúsenosť, pracovnú skúsenosť, ktorú mám ako tlmočníčka. Predstavte si, že ja som sa ako tlmočníčka dostala do Peru, do peruánskej džungle. Počuli ste správne. Stalo sa to tak, že minulý rok v lete mi môj bývalý klient zavolal a opýtal sa ma, či nechcem s ním a s jeho slovenskou priateľkou ísť do Peru, do džungle. A ja, že jasné, poďme. A tak sme išli na 2 týždne do Peru a tam sme, prosím pekne, boli so šamanom, ktorý nás liečil drogou ayahuasca. A zúčastňovali sme sa aj rôznych iných ceremonií a bolo to úplne úžasné a chcem vám o tom teraz povedať.
Well, she says that she went to Peru into the jungle. She liked the trip very much. She was there she was an interpreter there. It was in the summer last year. She was there with the Austrian client and his friend from Slovakia. They spent 2 weeks with the shaman. He healed them with a drug called ayahuasca. It was very interesting. She will tell you more about it.
Thank you. So that was a quick demonstration of interpreting. We will discuss it in a minute. But I will now show you a different type of interpreting, and this is a scene from a movie that many of you know. It's La Vita è Bella, an Italian film about a Jewish father who goes into a concentration camp together with his little son. And he doesn't want the son to know what's going on, so he tells him this story that it's all a game and we're just playing a game and collecting points and we can win a tank, you know? So when a soldier comes into one of the barracks and he asks, "Who speaks German? I will explain the rules to you and I want you to interpret it into Italian." He volunteers for that, even though he doesn't speak a word in German. And this is what happens.
Jeder Versuch der Sabotage wird mit dem sofortigen Tode bestraft. Die Hinrichtungen finden auf dem Hof durch Schüsse in den Rücken statt.
Ogni giorno vi daremo la classifica generale da quell'altoparlante là. All'ultimo classificato verrà attaccato con un cartello con su scritto asino, qui, sulla schiena.
Ihr habt die Ehre, für unser großes deutsches Vaterland arbeiten zu dürfen und am Bau des Großdeutschen Reiches teilzunehmen.
Noi facciamo la parte di quelli cattivi che urlano. Chi ha paura perde punti.
3 Grundregeln solltet ihr nie vergessen. Erstens, versuche nicht zu fliehen. Zweitens, folge jedem Befehl ohne Fragen. Drittens, jeder Versuch eines Aufstandes wird mit dem Tod durch Erhängen bestraft. Ist das klar?
In 3 casi si perdono tutti i punti. Li perdono 1, quelli che si mettono a piangere. 2, quelli che vogliono vedere la mamma. 3, quelli che hanno fame e vogliono la merendina. Scordatevela!
So that was now a demonstration of a different type of interpreting. And my question is, what does then make a good interpreter? Was Peter a good interpreter, you think? Did you have a good idea about like what he said? It was really what I said? Well, actually, in fact, he said absolutely what I said. The content was perfect. It was 100% of information. But you maybe didn't believe him so much, or you didn't trust him that he knows what he's doing, right? Whereas with Guido from this movie, you probably thought he's a perfect professional, like he knows exactly what he's saying and he says it really well. Whereas one word from what he said was not true. So the question is really what makes a good interpreter? And I now have a few points to discuss, but I will just really touch on them briefly. So of course you need to speak to two languages very well. The second thing is you need to also be able to translate between and switch between the two languages. And this is something that many people think if you're bilingual or if you're a polyglot, you can do it easily. But I think if you've ever tried it, you will find out it's not maybe as easy and as natural. But it can be learned, of course. You need to be able to split your attention very well and concentrate on two things. I will discuss it in a minute. You need to have a good memory. Imagine you're on a stage and the speaker speaks for 3-5 minutes, gives a lot of information, and you need to be able to say it in a while. You also need to concentrate a lot. You cannot daydream even for a second when you're interpreting. You need to be able to speak publicly, especially if you're doing consecutive interpreting and you're standing on the stage together with the speaker. And finally, you need to be resistant to stress too. I mean, it's quite a stressful job, but we'll discuss all of this a little later in more details. So let's have a look at simultaneous interpreting now. How does it look? So I'm a freelance interpreter. What happens? First of all, someone needs to contact me. And someone calls me, either an agency or a client, and they tell me, we have this conference on Roma integration. It's on Friday in 2 weeks. It's going to be a one-day event, English to Slovak, Slovak to English. Are you interested? And we discuss all the details, you know, we discuss the price too. And I think this is what you might be interested in too. How much do interpreters earn? Well, of course, I cannot tell you in one answer. I mean, it depends on so many things, but just to give you an idea, if you're working for a European Union institution, which is something most probable for you, I think, you would start with 300 euros a day. So that's more or less what you get for 6 to 8 hours of interpreting. So then I get the topic I need to prepare for the assignment. I collect all the information that I have. I make a glossary based on all the information. I also read a lot of parallel texts online, so it's not just the materials that the client gives me, but also other texts about Romas and Roma integration, for example, for this conference. And then I make the glossary, learn it, and go to the event. Now, when we're talking about simultaneous interpreting, there are always 2 or 3 interpreters in a booth. It's never a job you do on your own. And this is because it's really extremely difficult to concentrate on 2 things at the same time. You need to listen to the speaker and also listen to yourself, because you will wait a few seconds until you get what he's saying, and then you start speaking and you go with a little lag behind the speaker. And that's why you constantly need to concentrate and split your attention between these 2 things. And this is why you cannot do this for longer than 15 or 20 minutes in a row. You need to alternate with your colleague. So you interpret and you see like, okay, my concentration is going a little down. It's approximately 15 to 20 minutes. So you give a sign to your colleague. He puts on the headphones, he's ready, and then he interprets, and it goes like that all the day. So you cannot do this on your own. And also you need to cooperate in the booth. So when my colleague is interpreting, I'm not just sitting there reading newspapers or anything. I'm listening to him and I'm trying to help him. If there are some numbers which are very abstract and difficult to remember, I will write them down for the colleague. And actually tomorrow I'm having a workshop on simultaneous and consecutive interpreting exercises, which you could have signed up to. And I'm going to show you how difficult it is to remember numbers. So we'll try it with some of you tomorrow. Now, the key skills for interpreting are, as I said, the splitting of attention, listening to the speaker and to yourself at the same time. And this is why many interpreters actually do this type of interpreting. They don't have the headphones on both of their ears, but instead one ear is always uncovered. And this means that you are monitoring yourself with this one ear, and it enables you to finish all your sentences grammatically correct with the right intonation in a natural way. And also, what is very important with interpreting is the interpreting strategies. I will give you an example just to give you an idea what goes on in the head of an interpreter if he, for example, interprets from German. So I will provide an example that I think most of you will understand. So let's say the speaker says the following sentence. Die Ergebnisse unserer Sitzungen in der Arbeitsgruppe Recht werden in Anschluss an die Konferenz wahrscheinlich schon zur nächsten Bundestagssitzung am 15. Juni in Berlin im Rechtsausschuss des Bundestages von der Vorsitzenden unserer Konferenz, nämlich Ihnen, Frau Kaufmann, und dafür schon jetzt vielen Dank. Was wird damit getan? Now we're waiting for the verb, so basically the most important information. Any tips in here? Any guesses? Okay. But the original one was vorgetragen werden, so if you use a synonymous expression, you were right. Now, I think you managed to get the idea of what the sentence is trying to say. But now you're just listening to me and you didn't need to know it right away, you needed to know it at the end. But just imagine you're interpreting this sentence one word after another and you're doing it into English, okay? And then you go to werden im Anschluss an die Konferenz and you know that he's going to go on forever and you will be waiting for the verb and still you need to say something, right? Well, this is what we call anticipation. You anticipate what he will say and then you use this word. Sometimes, of course, it turns out you were not right. So sometimes when interpreting into German, you will say like, and the contract will be signed in here and there and on that day with whom, etc., etc. And then you hear the nicht at the end, and you go like, and this is not true. Okay, so unfortunately, that happens in interpreting. But this is one of the strategies that need to be trained, and this is what we studied for 5 years at the university, and we practice in the language combinations that we work for to make sure that we can anticipate well, we can generalize, we can simplify things, etc., because we always work with ideas. Okay, let's have a look at the second type of interpreting, which is called consecutive. As I said, it's when you are basically standing on the stage next to the speaker, you are not in the booth comfortably hidden where no one sees you, but you're there in front of the eyes of all the listeners. The beginning is the same. Someone needs to contact you for an assignment. Let's say it's a business meeting or it's a presentation, it's a talk, etc. And then you need to prepare for the assignment just in the same way. I mean, this process is the same and it's extremely important. You cannot skip that part. And then you will be standing next to the speaker. And after the speaker says a part of the speech, he will give you the space to interpret it into the other language. Sometimes these are just short sentences. Sometimes the speaker forgets about you and just, goes on and on and on. That actually happened to me in one of the press conferences that I interpreted. He totally forgot. He finished answering a question and then just stood up and went. And I was like, "Excuse me, I haven't finished." And I turned around all the pages that I had in my notepad. And he was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." But it was still possible. It was okay. So the key skills in here was public speaking, because you really need to be able to stand on stage. And if you suffer from a terrible stage fright, this will most probably not be a job for you. If you don't feel comfortable, of course, many of it can be trained, but I think people need to be at least naturally inclined to speaking in front of people. And then, as you can imagine, good memory is also very crucial. Again, this is something that can be trained and should be trained for sure for interpreters. And then, as I mentioned, I was taking notes while the speaker was saying, this is actually quite important too. It is the so-called note-taking technique. And I will give you now an example of what interpreters' notes look like, okay? Something like this. I hope you can see it from the back. And this is an example from a real interpreted assignment of a colleague of mine, an Austrian girl, who interpreted from German into English. And I will explain to you now what this part of the notes mean. This is basically 2 pages from a notepad, and she uses this margin here to mark things that are the most important ones, like linking words, logical links between individual statements, and also points of view of people who says something. You will hear an example in a minute. And then she uses a lot of symbols, and then she uses these lines here, which is very popular with many interpreters, to separate individual ideas. Not necessarily sentences, but ideas. So this thing here reads, she looks at the notes and she says, Hungary also believes that supporting mobility within the European Union does not solve the problem of youth unemployment because of the increased numbers of unemployed youth in the European Union. So this is what she says when she sees that, but this is not what I would say. I mean, if I look at those notes, it doesn't tell me much more than it tells to you right now. This is because every interpreter has a very individual system of note-taking, and all of these signs are her personal ones that she uses, and she understands them. It's like her personal code. So HU for Hungary, I think it's quite clear. This is her symbol for expressing an opinion. So Hungary also believes. Mob for mobility is enough because she knows that text is about mobility. She doesn't need to write the whole word. This thing, arrow here, will be supporting in her language, in her note-taking system. EU is clear. This does not equal to problem and cross, so it will not solve the problem. Okay. Alpha is used with many interpreters for something related to work or employment. So you can have an employer, an employee, unemployment, etc. And she put a little Y in here for youth, unemployment. And then da, the German, because, and then numbers. And this basically means because of the increased rate of unemployed youth within the European Union. Now, for all these expressions, she only needs to note NO because she knows what the speaker said. This is a good example to show you that the interpreter's notes are not there to give you every single part of the speech, and you are not supposed to read it. You are not supposed to write everything. It is just to jog your memory, just to remind you of what the speaker said and what you remember. So here we see that the interpreter really relies on their memory a lot. Now, to give you maybe a few ideas more how interpreters work with this note-taking system, you can write verb tenses in a very interesting way. So this would be the present tense, I work. This will be the past tense, I worked. This will be work, I will work in the future. And this could be I'm working, or that wouldn't make much sense actually. You only need to sign this, I think. This could be I would work, the conditional. Not really a tense, but well, we have it in the same category. Then for emphasis, you can see this is easy, this will be easier, the easiest, and something is relatively easy. So that's also a clever way to do that. And then abbreviations, which are also very handy. All these words can be noted down using the root only, so prod for production, etc. And then you put a little superscript in here saying if it's production or produce, productivity, etc. So these are just a few ideas. There is actually a whole theory about it, a whole world of note-taking techniques and methods, and it's something, again, that interpreters need to learn. They need to assimilate it and use it without thinking too much about it, because it's there to help them. So this was about consecutive interpreting, and now I'll tell you a few rules about interpreting, and you might be able to answer some of the questions here based on what I've already said. So, do we interpret sense or do we interpret words? Sense, of course. Interpreters never work with words. We always work with ideas. And that's why when a German speaker says, jetzt geht's um die Wurst, you will not say, now it goes about the sausage, right? Also, another important rule, do we speak in the first or in the third person? Yes, what Peter did here, he started his little act. It was, of course, not a real interpreting. I think you got that, right? He said, well, she says that, she was, and she thinks. And this is actually a sign of a very amateur interpreter, if you ever see one doing that. This is the first rule you ever learn in any course. You always speak in the first person. And even if a woman in English says, I'm curious, and you're interpreting her into French as a guy, you as a guy will say, je suis curieuse, and not curieux. This is really, really important. I mean, you are basically taking over the personality of that speaker, and you are not yourself anymore. That's very important. Now, that also has to do with the question number 3. Do you think you can explain or express your own opinions? Of course not. I mean, you cannot mock the speaker in any way. Like, just imagine you're at a conference and the speaker says something and you hear a little in the headphones, you know? You're never to put anything personal in the interpretation. You are just saying what the speaker is, and if he's pressing something that you completely do not agree with, still you need to say it in a very persuasive and convincing way, because you are the voice of the speaker now. Do you think you should correct your own mistakes? No? Yes? It depends. That's the right answer, exactly. If it's just a little mistake, like a slip of a tongue, or you said a sentence and it's just grammatically or stylistically a really, really poor sentence, and it's because you were thinking about the grammar structure of another language, you should not try to embellish it and make it perfect. You just continue because the message was clear. If, however, you make a mistake, a serious one, you should definitely admit it and confess and then correct it. For example, it happened to me in one of the interpreting assignments that I had. We had several booths. There's usually some of them. It was in Poland, and there were thousands of people, like 8,000 people in one room. And there were, I think, 6,000 Polish listeners. And the Polish interpreters made a little mistake. The speaker said, he was on the stage, and he said, well, just imagine if I had 100 free tickets for this exclusive seminary there in Mallorca for 1 week. Would you like to be the first ones to get it? And they didn't use the conditional. They actually said something like, I have 100 tickets. Do you want them? And people started rushing in from the whole room towards the stage. And the speaker was like, what's going on, Like, that was just an example. I mean, people, go back to your seats. So it's actually, just a small mistake, but if you forget about the conditional, it can actually change and influence the whole event. So that's why, in that case, it is important to just swallow your pride and say, I'm very sorry. Interpreters apologize, and the speaker said something else. Another question, do you think you should correct the speaker's mistakes? No, never? Never, ever? Well, if the speaker says, again, it's a slip of a tongue, or like you're talking about something, and all the time you're talking about $500,000, and suddenly the speaker says 500 million or something, you can correct that. I mean, if you're absolutely sure that you know what he meant and it was not a problem. But if you correct a mistake that the speaker made, and let's say half of the room understands the language of the speaker and half of the room is listening through the headphones. Now the speaker made a mistake, and those people who understood him heard the mistake, but the people who used the interpretation actually heard the correct, or let's say another version. And then there is a discussion, and some people ask on that part of the room, excuse me, but you said in your talk this and this and that, and I don't think that's true. And then these people go like, no, he didn't say that, he said something else. So this is why it's extremely dangerous to go and correct the mistakes as you seem fit. That's why it depends. And then another tip is to always finish your sentences. And this may sound stupid, but if you ever try simultaneous interpreting for the first time, you will understand why I'm saying that. All of my students always in the first lessons just stop in the middle of the sentence and are not able to finish it in any way because their mind is just concentrating on so many things. So this is a thing that, again, must be trained. And also you must pay attention to the packaging. Now, as I said, Peter was a really good interpreter as for the content, but you did not probably see him like that. Why? Because the packaging was not very good. I mean, he was standing here looking at the floor, looking at me like, did I say that right? This is all completely wrong. You must present it in a way like you know what you're saying. So these are the do's and don'ts. Now, let's have a look at a few crisis situations. And I will always give you examples from my real life, my real experience. This is a question I get asked all the time when I say I'm an interpreter. Well, what happens if you don't know a word? A terrible crisis situation, a catastrophe, really. I'll tell you an example. I was interpreting, from Polish, again, at the same event. And a speaker was saying a little anecdote in Polish. And he used one word that I had never heard before in Polish. And I was interpreting simultaneously into Slovak, and I needed to think of something quickly. I will now tell you the story. I will say it in English, but instead of the last word, I will actually use the Polish word, which only some of you here will understand, okay? So he said, so here I was, about to jump from the plane, doing my first parachute jump ever, totally scared. And you know what I saw when I looked down from the 4 kilometers down below me? I didn't see a nice piece of soft grass. Oh no, I saw a krawężnik. Okay, so make your guess, make an educated guess what he could say in that situation. Well, I understood that the situation, it was a funny anecdote. All of the Polish people were laughing. And like, what could it possibly be? He's scared, he's looking down. Actually, it gives you a contrast. I didn't see a nice piece of soft grass, which was actually there. I saw a what? Depth. Okay, I'm sure he must have seen that. But basically, you need something which is in contrast to soft grass, and something which will create an image in the mind of the speakers, like the result of falling down on that will be just terrible, a mess. So I had no idea what it is, krawężnik. What the hell is that? So I said, I saw a cement plate. That's what I said. And actually, krawężnik means a curb, the end of a sidewalk. So I was not so far from it. And now the question is that a right translation or not? Well, it is in the context. It was functional. Everybody got the idea of me falling, on a piece of cement plate. And then when he used the word again and again, krawężnik, later, I just stuck with a cement plate. And if he, for example, if he had evolved the idea in any other way, and he would have said like, oh, this part of the curb, how it looks, and he would describe it, then I would just say, a cement plate or a curb, and I would stick with a curb. So you can work with the words as you like. It's not really a problem. So that's what I'm trying to say. An example how you don't have to know all the words. And besides, I will remember krawężnik for the rest of my life. So that's a good way to learn languages too. Now the second one, the speaker doesn't talk into the microphone. Now this happens a lot when the speaker is presenting something and he will have a standing microphone in here and he will say, and so now I will show you how the sales in our last year dropped from 200 to, and he speaks like that. The people in the room get it more or less. You in the back of the booth, never, you don't understand. So what do you do then? Well, basically you need to jump out of your role of the speaker's voice, and you say, the interpreters apologize but cannot interpret as the speaker is not using the microphone. And then that's a perfectly correct sentence to say, and someone in the first rows will go like, excuse me, oh, talk to the microphone. And oh, sorry, interpreters. Happens all the time. Now, another crisis situation. So, you get interrupted audio input. This also happens quite often because the microphone is not working correctly, because your headphones are not working correctly, because someone kicked into a cable over there. It happens all the time. Sometimes it gets extreme. It happened to a colleague of mine that he was interpreting, and the handle on the door of the interpreting booth fell off. I don't know why. But somehow, someone thought it really important to correct it, to repair it there on the spot right away. So while my colleague was interpreting simultaneously, someone was actually drilling next to his head. And that's kind of stressful, I can tell you. But he managed it quite well. And what I really like about his approach, he also teaches interpreting at another university in Slovakia. And he actually brings a drill to one of the lessons and lets the student experience the nice sound of drill next to your head when you're concentrating on the speaker's speech. Crisis situation number 4. Someone in the audience corrects you. This has happened to me as well. I was doing a consecutive interpreting in front of, let's say, 200 people, and the speaker said about 3 sentences. It was a business presentation of a multi-level marketing company, and in those 3 sentences, I understood exactly what he wanted me to say in the first 2, but the third one was rather ambiguous. I was not sure where he's going with that, if he's going to go this way or this way. I mean, I saw possible interpretations, and so my strategy, interpreting strategy, was to just say the first 2 sentences and keep the other one in my head. And I said, okay, when he continues, I will just put the third sentence next to it, I will just chunk his text in a different way, and everybody's happy. But, of course, there was an elderly man from Slovakia who thinks that he speaks excellent English. And when I didn't say that, he was like, excuse me, you forgot to say that and that. And that was a really unpleasant situation because I couldn't actually tell him, well, thank you very much, sir. I actually know about that. It was not because I'm a bad interpreter and I didn't realize it or I didn't remember it. It's because I applied a strategy that interpreters do. You don't have any time and possibility to explain that. And so I just said, thank you. I kind of said word for word what he said, and I was hoping I would be right for the next of the speech. And well, this is something that happens all the time. This is basically something that I also like about interpreting. It's quite a humbling profession. You can never be too sure or cocky because there are always situations like that. And finally, a situation which happens all the time, very frequently, the speaker tells a joke. Now, you all know how jokes are difficult to interpret into another language, right? Imagine doing it on the spot when someone is saying it in a quick pace, and you need to do it right away, and you need to do it with the right punchline and with everything. It's really, really difficult. So often these jokes are not interpreted, but what can you actually do? Well, one of the advices there is that you see the interpreter is telling a joke. You see it's difficult to interpret because there are a lot of cultural allusions, a lot of language, word puns, etc. So you see you will not handle. So you say into the microphone, ladies and gentlemen, the speaker is telling a joke which cannot be interpreted into the Slovak language. To oblige the speaker and the interpreters, would you be as kind as to laugh now? And then the result is that everybody laughs at the same time. The speaker is happy, he told a good joke. Everybody had a good laugh. The interpreters are happy because they amused the listeners. Well, of course, this is something that you cannot apply in general. Okay, this is not a strategy which is advised for every context. If you know, it often happens that you interpret for the same people and for the same company. You know the people, you are on first name terms with most of them. In that case, I can imagine something like that. But of course, you cannot mock the speaker. You cannot make fun of them in any way. So this is what the crisis situations are. And actually, one more piece of advice: if you want to avoid a crisis situation, the best thing to do is not to commit yourself. That means if the speaker says, "I'm going to tell you a joke," or even better, a funny joke, then it's the best thing for interpreters to say is, "I'm going to tell you a story." Because that means if the joke is really, if it falls flat, you have no problem. You did not commit yourself to saying something funny. And then if it's funny, that's all the best for the speaker and for you. Everyone's happy. But if it's not, it's better not to announce it in advance. Okay, let's have a look at the real pleasures and pains of this job now. I'll start with the negative one so that we can end up with something more positive. So I think you all by now realize that it's not a really easy job, but of course it's not totally difficult. People mostly think it's more difficult than I think it is. It takes some training, it takes some practice, and of course some predispositions and language knowledge, etc., but it's not impossible. Secondly, it's kind of stressful too, because it doesn't matter how well you prepare for an event, you will always come on the stage and you don't know what you will say. You cannot prepare for everything, and there will be a joke that you need to translate on the stage, etc. So you need to just be ready that you'll handle the situation when it comes, and you'll improvise. Always something unexpected comes up. If it's a drill next to your head, or if it's a word you don't know, etc. At every interpreting event, I could tell you so many anecdotes from my work that we would be sitting here forever. And also, what a colleague of mine says, the worst thing about this job is that at the end of the conference what you should have known at the beginning. So you have heard all the talks and you now understand the topic perfectly, and you know now that you could interpret the first talk much better, but it's too late. You interpret it with a more limited knowledge, unfortunately. And also, you depend on the quality of the input a lot. So if the speaker is very poor, if your headphones don't work, if the microphone doesn't work, if someone is going in and out of your booth for some reason, you are not able to interpret very well. But who will be to blame for that? Of course, the interpreter. And finally, one thing that many interpreters experience after many years of interpreting is the so-called parrot syndrome. This basically means that you meet a lot of people, you hear a lot of interesting things, you have a lot of your own ideas, but no one is interested to hear them. You are only repeating other people's words, so you're just like a parrot. And that's what many people find frustrating, and they go like, when can I present my own opinion? When will someone want to listen to me? So that's one of the downsides of this job. But let's look at the positive sides now. So what I find really nice about this job is that it's kind of recognized in society, and people always go like, when I tell them I'm an interpreter, they go like, "Oh my God, I admire interpreters so much. You guys do a really difficult job." And besides, sometimes you get your 3 seconds of fame on the Slovak national TV when you are interpreting someone from the European Investment Fund and you are just taking notes on the camera, but still a picture that all of my friends liked on Facebook. So it does give you a kind of a professional satisfaction in that way. Secondly, interpreters travel in their work. Not all the time, maybe if you're working with Arabic, Chinese, or other exotic languages, but within Europe you don't travel all the time. You mostly work in your country and your city. but sometimes you do travel, and it can get very nice. This will be me in Turkey, like half an hour before going to the booth and interpreting a conference there, enjoying the sun and enjoying the sea. And this is me in Machu Picchu, where I got as an interpreter. That was what I told you at the beginning, and Peter translated it. So you can get to really interesting assignments as an interpreter. And this is me and my 2 clients using our free time after the interpreting assignment. Thirdly, you get to see a lot of interesting things. This is a view from my booth, interpreting booth at this event in Poland, where there were 8,000 people and they were really having a great time, and we saw it all from the VIP positions. So it was really nice just to be at an event like that and just to see it from that point of view. Also, you get to meet people other people don't normally meet. So this is the reason why these 8,000 people were there. Some of you might know Tony Robbins. He actually came to the booth to thank us after the event, which was very nice. So we enjoyed that. And you might know a few people in this picture. This is the Czech president, the Hungarian one, the Polish one, the former Slovak one. These are their wives, and this is my head. So it was really nice just to see what these people talk about, how a summit like that looks like. It was really interesting from the professional and personal point of view. And finally, you get to go to many interesting places too. So as I mentioned, the Peru trip, this is the reason why we went there. This is a shaman, a 90-year-old shaman that I interpreted from Spanish into German and Slovak. And he was healing people with ayahuasca, the jungle drug that some of you might know. We spent 2 weeks there doing other ceremonies as well, having a great time in the middle of the Peruvian jungle. This is something you don't normally expect to do when you study to be an interpreter, but sometimes you get a rewarding assignment like that. So we would be doing several ceremonies a day. It was really interesting. And that's basically all I wanted to say about this. But now the question for you, how to become an interpreter. I mean, after the perks of the job you've seen, you might think you would like to try it. I don't know if you've ever if you ever try that, and if you are interested in that. But I will just give you a quick advice, maybe very general, and if you'd like to discuss it in more details, we can discuss it then in person. Well, first of all, you need to take a course or do a university degree. I know very few people who do it just like that, just by intuition. It's kind of difficult because you need to know all these techniques and strategies and practice the note-taking, etc. So that's why most people will ask you, well, most companies will need you to give some paper that you attended a course. Then I would really recommend to you to start with the European Union institutions, even if your mother tongue is not an official European Union language. They are interested in Russian too, they're interested in Arabic, they're interested in Serbian, etc. So this is a good way to go because you need to have your mother tongue and 2 foreign languages, mostly where you interpret at least from your mother tongue into one of them, let's say from Slovak into English, and then another European language where you interpret from that language into your mother tongue. But this differs a lot with the combination of languages and how many interpreters they need right now for Estonian, how much they need for Greek, etc. You can find all that on the websites of the European Union institutions, what interpreters they're looking for right now. And then this is the very important part. Taking a course does not suffice. You really need to practice a lot, practice on your own. And that's where these 2 books could maybe come in handy. I really recommend you the Roderick Jones book, Conference Interpreting Explained, which has a lot of information of the type that I provided here about the practical things about interpreting. And if you want to really practice, then this book is Conference Interpreting a Student's Practice book, is full of exercises which are really interesting. You can mostly do them together with other people who are interested in that, or on your own, or with a partner, etc. And it's really recommend. I really recommend to read these books if you are more interested in interpreting. And that would be basically all I wanted to share with you. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I had heard once that one should only interpret or translate into one's mother tongue. You said that sometimes for the European Union you sometimes have to translate, for instance, into English. You mentioned interpreting into Spanish or into German. What is your opinion, or what would you like to say about that?
Of course, thank you. That's a very good question. In the Western European countries, this is like the rule number one. You only interpret from a foreign language into your mother tongue. Well, you can imagine it's very well possible. You want an English interpreter in France, you pick one of the hundreds and thousands of native speakers who are living in France and interpreting from French. Now go to Slovakia and try to pick an interpreter who will interpret from Slovak into their mother tongue, English. I do not know about one single person who would be there. So that's why in Slovakia, on a language market which is very small, there are 5 million of Slovaks only. There are native speakers living there. They speak some Slovak, but not on the level to be able to interpret. In that case, I personally interpret much more into English than I interpret from English, and it's just out of necessity. In the European Union, this changes too. Imagine, right now we have 24 official languages, right? Imagine you are in the parliament where people are from all over the world, all over Europe, and someone in Greek wants to say one sentence, and you need to interpret everything into all the languages. So will you have a Greek Estonian interpreter, a Greek Lithuanian, a Greek Polish, a Greek Slovak sitting there if the Greek interpreter decides to interpret something? It doesn't work like that. So in that case, there is someone always who interprets from these small languages into English, French, or German. And then all the other interpreters take it from these 3 languages. These are like the 3 most important languages. So that's why even in the European Union, this has changed with the increasing number of languages, and you need to be able to interpret also into a foreign language.
I have a question. So how important is looks in consecutive interpreting?
Looks in the meaning of?
How a person looks.
Okay. Yeah. Well, of course, it is important. Also, the dress code is quite important. So you need to be in a presentable way, let's say. You shouldn't have any piercings or maybe visible tattoos. This is something that your client would not agree with. So if you are like that as an interpreter and you want to be very expressive about your look, then most probably you will not get many clients.
As an interpreter, do you have a symptom that you talk to your friends and all of a sudden you realize that in your head you're still interpreting what they're saying?
Yes, this happens to me especially with movies in the cinema. I cannot really relax and just watch a movie. I see the subtitles and I go like, oh my god, this is not right. They should have used a better word. This is kind of tiring. I prefer to watch without subtitles, even if I don't speak the language very well. Yeah, it does happen. And also I interpret a lot for my friends, but not because I'm an interpreter, but because I like to hang out with many international people, which is practical. Yes.
Two small questions. The first one about la syndrome del pappagallo. Je voulais mieux comprendre. And the second one is... among polyglots, we always talk about, okay, how many languages do you speak, which ones, so which level do you consider? Now, among interpreters, and you can more easily define how many languages are you able to work in. Yes. And so, considering these working languages, which is the most polyglot interpreter you know? I mean, how many?
I know there is an interpreter in the European Union who works with a lot of languages, but I'm not able to tell you exactly. I think it's like 14 or something. He interprets from them. Unfortunately, I don't know more about him. But as for these languages, yes, there is a clear system of saying what languages you work with, and it's called the A, B, and C. So A is always your mother tongue, that's Slovak for me. B language is the ones that you interpret from, and into, both of them, so that's English for me. And then C languages are the ones that you, let's say, passively understand. You can interpret from them into other languages. And yes, what would you like to ask about that?
To understand something more. What is it?
Oh, okay, you didn't understand. Okay, so it means that I've been working as an interpreter for 20 years, and I have this nice job where I learn a lot of things, but at the same time, I have the feeling that I'm in the shade of someone, in the shade of the speaker always. And let's say I interpret I interpret a speaker who is not very clever, or I don't think he's very clever, and someone asks him about their opinions, and they're saying these really simple things, and you are standing there and you're thinking, do I actually need this job? I mean, is it so rewarding for me to just repeat these rather stupid ideas that I don't agree with, and I think a lot more interesting could be said about it? So it's just a feeling that you might have in your head after several years.
There's a question here from the back. So actually, I wanted to be an interpreter. Unfortunately, or fortunately, my career went into a different direction. But I was always very curious, what do you do if your speaker is really not clever? So we had our Lech Wałęsa, our second Polish president. He was president, but he was uneducated, and he was using very colloquial language in very official situations. So have you ever experienced something like that? And what do you do in these situations? I mean, this language, his jokes are, I mean, he's joking all the time. It's untranslatable, and you have to invent your own language.
Yes. Well, yes. I mean, you just need to think on your feet and just deal with the situation as it is and try to make the best out of it. If, for example, the speaker is using a slang, or a dialect, which is very specific, let's say in Poland it would be from a region that people associate with something, like let's say a lower level or something, I would speak with normal English, but I would then add the information that the speaker is constantly speaking using this dialect, or just add some information on top of that, so that people get the additional information too. But if you think that your speaker is not very clever, there's not much you can do about it. I mean, you're paid to repeat what the person said, so you can try to improve it slightly. You can try to make it sound more intelligent, but you cannot make up the content, unfortunately.
If we haven't signed up for the exercise, how can we do it?
Okay, that's actually something I want to tell you. Judith posted it on Facebook. There is a list of up to 50 people, not more, will fit in that little room number 3 tomorrow. Please, only those that are signed up on that list show up for the workshop, because we will not be able to do it with more. And if you decided you will not be able to come, please, I posted it on Facebook yesterday again, please delete your name so that someone else can come. So hopefully, if you look at Facebook right now, you might still get a free place.
Thank you. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question to the parrot syndrome. When and if you feel that, how do you, in your outside life, cultivate then your own feeling of expressing yourself? If you understand what I mean.
Yes.
How do you get around that so you feel like you're also living your own, your own ideas? And
Well, I do it by going to polyglot conferences and speaking to people. Well, I think there are many ways. I mean, for many people, this is not a problem at all. And this is not something that necessarily happens in the career of an interpreter. Many people don't have a problem with that at all. It's just some people that feel that they should be more creative, or they would like to create more, something of themselves. And I think in that case, you can easily do it with something else, or you can do it later on in life and change the career. You can, do it like this, like present in front of people what you think is your idea. I think it's very individual. It's not a real problem for many people, I would say.
I'd like to add something to the question of translating into your mother tongue or from your mother tongue into a foreign language, because I think maybe not everyone in here is aware that translating and interpreting are two different jobs. Like, translating is everything written and interpreting is spoken, and that's always the case. And if you're translating, you should only ever do it into your mother tongue. And if you're interpreting, it depends on the situation, because sometimes you interpret a conversation between two people, and then you obviously have to go into both directions. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good point. But unfortunately, for the really small markets like Slovakia, even translations are done by non-native speakers, and then they are proofread by native speakers necessarily.
Is the short question? I'm assuming that most interpretation work is freelance, very few staff positions. How long does it take to build up a clientele to keep yourself busy more or less full time?
That's extremely individual, and it depends on so many things. I cannot answer that question. It depends on your working languages, on the market you are working in, if you are specializing on something or not, and also on your active approach. So if you are really promoting yourself a lot, or you're just waiting for some assignments to come in, we can discuss it maybe later in more details if you would like, but it's a vast topic.
We are done with our time, but I think you can ask our presenter directly after the talk. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much.